President-elect Joe Biden is counseling calm about the transition tonight, even if President Trump never concedes he lost. Mr. Biden already has 290 electoral votes in an Associated Press tally, with 3 states not yet called, and a lead of almost 5 million popular votes, pushing him over the 50% mark. Today, he held his first news conference since Election Day. White House correspondent Yamiche Alcindor begins our coverage.
An embarrassment. That's the way President-elect Joe Biden described President Trump's refusal to concede the election. And Mr. Biden insisted it will have no effect on the handover of power.
We are already beginning the transition. We're well underway. And the ability for the administration in any way by failure to recognize this our win does not change the dynamic at all in what we're able to do.
For his part, President Trump had no public events again today, but he did take to Twitter. He repeated unfounded claims of widespread fraud, saying, quote, "Watch for massive ballot counting abuse, and just like the early vaccine, remember I told you so." And overnight, his Justice Department provoked new rancor. Democrats at a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing blasted Attorney General William Barr for telling federal prosecutors to investigate any substantial allegations of voter fraud.
They have no evidence whatsoever of election fraud. If they did, they would certainly bring it forward.
Last night, in response to Barr's actions, the head of the Justice Department's Election Crimes Branch resigned in protest. Today, there is still no indication that the General Services Administration will formally acknowledge the Biden victory and free up funding for transition work. At the State Department, Secretary Mike Pompeo was questioned about whether he is ready to engage with the Biden transition team.
There will be a smooth transition to a second Trump administration. Right? We're ready. The world is watching what's taking place here. We're going to count all the votes.
On another front, Democratic committee chairs in the House released a statement today directing the White House and more than 50 other federal agencies to preserve documents related to congressional subpoenas and investigations. Meanwhile, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell dismissed concerns that most GOP lawmakers are refusing to publicly acknowledge Joe Biden as president-elect.
At some point here, we'll find out, finally, who was certified in each of these states, and the Electoral College will determine the winner, and that person will be sworn in on January 20th. No reason for alarm.
On the Senate floor, the Democratic leader, Chuck Schumer, denounced the GOP for refusing to take a stand.
The extent to which the Republican Party is legitimizing the president's assault on our democracy is infuriating and deeply, deeply wrong. The president is not merely bringing forward well-founded legal challenges.
And Democratic Senator Chris Coons from Biden's home state of Delaware said Republicans have been calling him to privately congratulate the president-elect.
My job here, I think, is to continue to urge them privately to do the right thing and to help the president accept reality and to help their caucus stand up publicly.
All the while, time is ticking. Electors from all 50 states and D.C. will meet to vote on December 14, 2020. The vote count is then finalized on January 6, 2021, leading up to the presidential inauguration on January 20th. But between then and now, the president's false claims are echoing with many of his supporters.
Biden has not won the election. All of the legal ballots have not been counted. There's been multiple cases of voter fraud happening throughout the entire state of Michigan.
There has been no evidence of widespread voting irregularities. Trump supporters are now planning what they call a Million MAGA March in Washington on Saturday.
And Yamiche is at the White House tonight, while our Lisa Desjardins joins us from Wilmington, Delaware. And Lisa, to you first. You were in the room when the president-elect spoke to reporters today. His team is proceeding work on the transition. Tell us what we know about that.
You know, you don't see a lot of this, of course, in public, not only because it's transition, but because of the coronavirus. But I have a lot of reporting, Judy. Today, the president-elect announced his agency transition teams, review teams. This is 540 people, volunteers, who are tasked with getting together with the agencies running government and to form plans and get ready for the handover of government. Judy, essentially what's going on here is the Biden campaign has been running a parallel system since June to get ready for transition, to begin thinking about hiring of the 4,000 positions that any new president has to fill. And the Biden transition team is full steam ahead in operating and moving towards getting government to operate. So when you think about the former vice president, now president-elect today, when I looked at him in that room today, I saw a man who was comfortable in his stance, hand in his pocket, did not seem in a hurry, but spoke about the issues, which is what he says is leading his plan for transition. And the first issue he talked about today, along with Vice President-elect Harris, was health care.
Beginning on January 20th, the Vice President-elect Harris and I, we're going to do everything in our power to ease the burden of health care on you and your families. I promise you that. As I said, I will protect your health care like as my own family. And we've been, unfortunately, significant consumers of health care. That starts by building on the Affordable Care Act, with the dramatic expansion of health care coverage and bold steps to lower health care costs. My transition team will soon be starting its work to flesh out the details so that we can hit the ground running. Come January, we're going to work quickly with the Congress to dramatically ramp up health care protections, get Americans universal coverage, lower health care costs as soon as humanly possible. That's the promise I make to you.
We just had an election in America, an election where health care was very much on the ballot. Our country had a clear choice in this election. Each and every vote for Joe Biden was a statement. And Joe Biden won the election decisively, with more votes than have ever been cast in American history. It amounts to 75 million voices and counting, calling on the Supreme Court to see this case for what it is, a blatant attempt to overturn the will of the people. And the president-elect and I cannot let that happen.
I've had the opportunity to speak with now 6 world leaders, and the response has been very fulsome, energetic. I know from my discussions with foreign leaders thus far that they are hopeful that the United States democratic institutions are viewed once again as being strong and enduring. But I think at the end of the day, it's all going to come to fruition on January 20th. And between now and then, my hope and expectation is that the American people do know and do understand that there has been a transition. Even among Republicans who are people who voted for the president, I understand the sense of loss. I get that. But I think the majority of the people who voted for the president, a lot voted for him, a significantly smaller number, but a lot voted for him. I think they understand that we have to come together. I think they're ready to unite, and I believe we can pull the country out of this bitter politics that we've seen for the last 5, 6, 7 years.
And Lisa, staying with you, we know the president-elect has yet to hear from a large majority, from most of the Republicans in the Congress with whom he will have to work. As president, a number of them he knows from having served in the Senate. How is this going to affect his agenda?
President-elect Biden today said he has not heard from Mitch McConnell, the Senate Republican leader, but he said he expects to soon. There are 2 issues here, Judy. One, Republicans still not saying that President Biden has won the election. I had many phone calls with sources today, Republican Senate sources, who said to me, Lisa, the election has not been called. And I was in the unusual position of saying back to them, the election has been called. In their mind, they think until this process is completed to President Trump's satisfaction, it's not over. They also point out that whenever it's completed, and they believe it will be, as you heard Mitch McConnell say, it might not change what faces President-elect Biden, which is a closely divided Senate and a Republican Senate, especially, that has been running very aggressively against any kind of Democratic agenda, including his. One other note, Judy, I asked these Republican sources, when do they think? Do they think we're going to wait until January 20th before Republicans will say that President-elect Biden is actually our leader? They all say no. They think it will be sooner, perhaps in the next week and a half, they hope, but they don't know. It rests with President Trump.
And meantime, Yamiche, the president and the people around him are not cooperating with the transition. They are continuing to push these lawsuits. What is your sense from them? What is the attitude that that you see there, and what is their strategy?
Well, President Trump is indignant. He is getting angrier and angrier as he watches President-elect Joe Biden pivot away from campaigning and full on into transition mode. Of course, the president is not in transition mode. And he's really running a public and private operation to try to pressure GOP lawmakers, GOP's lawmakers and elected officials across the country to back him, holding the line. The vice president went to the Senate Republican lunch today on Capitol Hill with one clear message: keep on fighting. They are absolutely focused on this idea that the president has to be defended, that his ways and his false claims have to be continued to be echoed by Republicans all across the country. Now, it comes to the legal strategy. They're continuing to file lawsuit after lawsuit. The head of the legal strategy for the Trump campaign, David Bossie, he remains fighting the coronavirus, but I'm told that he's doing well, that he's working remotely. What we're seeing, though, is cases being tossed out again and again in Pennsylvania, in Georgia, in Michigan, in Nevada. The Biden campaign held a briefing today to talk about their legal strategy. They say that their legal strategy is to continue to push back and show that the president does not have any evidence for his legal claims. They were also quoting several judges from saying things like, the Biden campaign was saying that the Trump campaign has no evidence and that they were being essentially presenting evidence that was utterly unsupported and fiction. One other thing, Judy, I pushed the Biden campaign and said, well, are you looking for evidence? Are you having to defend yourself? What is your strategy? They said that their evidence is the 75 million votes that President-elect Joe Biden got. They also said that all of the things that they're seeing in the Trump campaign, the legal lawsuits, the press conferences, the tweets, the emails, that none of that is really law. They said it's all noise. They also said that this is theatrics, not really lawsuits. So what we're seeing from the Biden campaign is a strategy to message and a strategy to defend themselves, while the Trump campaign is continuing to file lawsuits. They say at some point this might all end up in the Supreme Court, but both sides think that they might win that. But the Biden campaign and the Trump campaign feel very, very indignant and solid on their sides. So the Trump campaign continues to be angry.
Well, it is just extraordinary, certainly not your typical transition. Yamiche Alcindor at the White House, Lisa Desjardins in Wilmington. Thank you both.